Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of this series of videos that we have created for you to explore the topic of video and language learning. In this second part, we're going to cover video as a tool and video as a task. The next part, the next video, will cover video as a text. Jane Willis invites us to think about video as a teaching aid. She states that video materials can be very valuable teaching resources in the same way as a textbook or audio tapes. As teachers, we already use many teaching techniques and classroom activities in combination with different aids and materials. And these combinations can also be used with video. In fact, Jane Willis states that video adds a further dimension because it also involves different combinations of oral and written texts. We can use a picture without sound, sound without pictures, pictures and sound, and so on and so forth. The important thing to remember is that regardless the combination we use in our language classroom, the same basic pedagogical and linguistic principles should apply to our teaching. And this is something that Gary and I have emphasized since our first lesson in week 1. We have said that the issues about getting excited about experimenting with different digital technologies is that we can easily lose track of our learning goals. So the first thing we need to have very clear in our minds is what the learning outcomes are. In other words, what do I want my students to achieve by the end of this session? Once this is clear, then we can utilize video to scaffold this learning process. In her chapter, 101 Ways to Use Video, Willis outlines 6 potential roles for video. The first one refers to model and cue. This is all about presenting new language, items in short, well-contextualized situations, and you could do this with the purpose of doing a listening practice, offering visual clues for teacher model drilling, and so on and so forth. The next role refers to target. This means to show target situations so that students can reenact these situations using their own words, for example, a role play or any other types of interactions. Then we have transfer and reinforcement, which refers to illustrating the target language in use in a far wider variety of relevant situations. This usually requires the use of long episodes of video. The next role refers to illustrating a message or discourse structure. This is all about exposing students to larger chunks of language that they may not initially be able to understand, but which will illustrate a typical text structure. The next role refers to source of information. This means providing material of which the content is relevant to students, their needs, their interests, all this with the purpose of providing information and retrieve information from students. So we may want to ask them to present a mini lecture after they have listened to a video, watched a video. We may ask them to report on this video and the content of it. And last but not least, we have the role of stimulus. This is all about providing material which acts as a motivator for freer classroom activities. So we may ask them to play a game or solve a problem or even discuss different topics such as cultural elements of different places around the world and engage them in this kind of freer activities that enable them to practice the language skills. Alan discusses the roles for video in relation to learner ability to process content. She suggests that in the early stages of language learning, video can largely be used to provide the stepping stones to the real world of language, and use it to provide examples of how this language is used in different types of contexts. She goes on to suggest that video materials which are suitable for this purpose should provide as much visual support as possible. By the intermediate stages of learning, Allen acknowledges that learners are developing control of the language and that they are better able to transfer language use from one context to another. Video then can be used to help students to move from isolated language items to begin to focus on the real use of those items to convey a message. And finally, by the advanced stages of the learning process, Allen maintains that learners are able to cope with the real-world experience and that video is a means of putting them in the same position as native speakers. This is in fact the first time that Allen says that programs can be viewed as programs and that tasks which assume a high level of comprehension on video material should be used. So, in other words, this is where students can actually operationalize all those higher level skills of analyzing, engaging with the information, discussing the information, and become critical viewers. Allen's ideas on advanced learners being able to cope with a real-world experience connect to our perspective number 2, video and real-world tasks. We have said that one of the outcomes of language learning is to enable students to develop higher-level skills. This is to be able to collect information, analyze it, evaluate it, engage in discussions, take decisions, and in other words, become critical viewers and thinkers. One issue relevant to the current access to video text is to be able to engage with video with the purpose of focusing on meaning rather than on discrete language items. Stemplensky emphasizes that in the video age, it makes sense to incorporate video-based media into teaching so that students can become more effective and critical viewers. Brown and Yule state that when integrating video in the language classroom, language teachers should still refer to what is known about listening comprehension and relate the same principles to the specifics of video. They explain that the aim of any listening comprehension is to enable learners to arrive successfully at a reasonable interpretation and not to process every word.